This conference will now be recorded.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1 on the agenda is consider approval of consent agenda items.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Okay, as we get ready for item number 2, which is requests or comments from the public, I just wanted to take a second and thank everyone for coming today. We greatly value your input. Just wanted to give a quick reminder as you come up to the podium to please state your name and address. We will be limited to 3 minutes. I have a sign to give you a warning when we get down to 30 seconds to give you a heads up, and don't want to be abrupt when I cut you off, but just in respect for everyone else's time, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone that would like to give public comments? Okay, please state your name and address.
My name is Sharice Sparks, and I live at 10526 Richland Avenue, spelled Charisse, last name Sparks. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Rhonda and I oppose the Evergy application for special use permit to place an electrical substation 550 feet from our home of 30 years. That is in the Wyandotte County appraiser values at over $500,000. And this is a very low valuation because there are no comparables in the area. The reasons for our opposition include, but are not limited to, those that I will present here, because we have not had an opportunity to review the amended agenda that was filed at 10 a.m. this morning, nor were the changes to that agenda made public and identifiable. But the reasons for our opposition include those that Rhonda spoke about at the public hearing held by the Planning Commission on the application. Number 2, reasons stated by the Planning Commission in their decision to deny the application. 3, the information that Rhonda has prepared to submit to the Planning Commission, but waited to submit until the Planning Commission had a written record of the motion and decision by the Planning Commission listing all the ways in which the application does not meet the Edwardsville and state requirements. State staff, for unknown reasons, failed to prepare the accurate record for the Planning Commission hearing, so she could not submit ours and other citizens' objections to the application. Next, the Edwardsville ordinances require a public hearing on the application, but this meeting is not a public hearing on the changes Evergy seeks to amend to its application significantly by its submission today of additional and changed information in support of its original application, which differs from what they had on Friday, which differs from what they had in the original application. If the council is inclined to consider these changes, find the material and grant the application today, we strongly object. Next, the amended application is deceptive, incomplete, ill-conceived, as was the original application. Additional opposition reasons because of devastating property values with the placement of a substation 550 feet from our property. Documented reductions elsewhere show 10 to 40% reduction in property values. Evergy says it doesn't think that it will devalue the property, but they are only using anecdotal evidence. And finally, they say that the poles that are 7 feet tall aren't very big. But I would show you a couple of pictures that give you a demonstrable example of just how big the 7-story tall poles would be in front of your home and on your property. Thank you so much for the time and attention.
Do you have any other comments?
My name is William Schaffman. I live at 10549 Richland. I am Rhonda's neighbor. I'm sure as close as I live to where this is going to be put up, that I'm going to hear the buzzing noise. I'm opposed to that. I do not want that. I also have 2 horses over on Rhonda's property that is going to be exposed to this power plant. And we all know that, you know, it's got dangerous, you know, things that can be done to not only people, but livestock too. I don't understand why they want to put this in a, you know, an area, you know, a housing area like that. Why don't they find somewhere else to put it, in Bonner Springs, somewhere other than, you know, around people with livestock and people that are trying to make an honest, good living and have quiet evenings. The place out there at night is quiet. It's not going to be if you guys let them put this in there. So I hope that you vote no. Thank you.
Did we have any other comments?
My name is Roseanne Gortenberg, and I live at 134 South 102nd Street. This proposal would border my land on the west side where my woods are, where I hike every day. First, I want to apologize. I wrote to each of you individually, and I mentioned 35-foot poles, and I was in error. I think the poles inside the substation are going to be 35 feet. The poles that we would be forced to put on our land, depending on whose land it would be, are twice that, 60 to 75 feet tall. I don't know who would buy a piece of property with a 75-foot pole on it. I don't know who would want a piece of property with a 75-foot pole on it. So sorry I got that wrong about the poles, but that is the truth. These things are noisy. They are about the sound of a vacuum cleaner. And what Evergy did not put in their report is this is an incessant sound. So you're listening to a vacuum cleaner nonstop when you sleep, when you're awake, if you work at home, if you have a baby who is a light sleeper, you're going to listen to the sound of a vacuum cleaner all the time for the rest of the time you live there. There is a public health concern. These things are implicated in health concerns, notably childhood leukemia. I could not find any definitive report that said absolutely it does this, but I also looked for definitive reports that said it doesn't, and there isn't none. It probably has not been studied very much. Like I said, it borders my woods. I hike there every day, and I always hike to the very end of my property because that land is so beautiful. I always want to look at it, so it would definitely disturb the appearance. It does decrease property values 10 to 40%. Like I said, if you have a pole on your land, who's going to want to buy that? And I certainly would not want to buy a piece of property that was adjacent to an electric substation. The comparables that are in the staff report that Evergy said, they're not comparable to where they say, oh, we looked at this substation in Olathe. This is a rural area. It's different if you live urban or suburban and you're used to that kind of noise. One report that I researched said that this is like listening to a busy downtown street all the time. I purposely do not live in a downtown because I don't want to listen to a busy street. So that would negatively impact me and probably most of the people here. They say it doesn't, about the animals. Okay, I understand that they did the study and there are no endangered species involved, but there are animals up there. I mean, we live, you know, with all kinds of animals and they would be affected. It's not compatible with adjacent properties. It has no benefit to Edwardsville. It's for KCK and Bonner Springs. It's not consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. It's only good for non-Edwardsville benefit, people who live non-Edwardsville. And I'm very concerned about them saying that they're going to sell the property. I don't know what that means. To whom are they going to sell it? What's going to happen then? I don't think that they understand rural property. They consistently refer to the property as underdeveloped or undeveloped. And my property, I have 10 acres and it's developed exactly as much as I want it to be. It's not undeveloped and it's not underdeveloped. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did we have anyone else for public comment? Sorry, only once. I don't think we can do that, but if anybody else, okay, if we don't have anyone else, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section of our meeting tonight. Thank you again, everyone, for coming and sharing. We do very much value your input. Item number 3 is consider a motion to recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319 for consultation with legal counsel, which would be deemed privileged in attorney-client relationship as it relates to the development agreement involving the Kincaid project.
So moved. I'll make the
How
motion.
much time do we need?
I don't think we need 15 minutes maximum, unless there's some, I mean, everybody's, I think, had, several opportunities. I know there's probably one item of discussion. So
I make the motion. We adjourn to executive session for no more than 15 minutes. Return at 6:25.
6:30,
6:25. 6:30. Let's make it even. Though.
Right.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Mawat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
He must just
I'll meet you all around there. I've got the keys in my
Smelling cedar.
It does smell like something. Like something.
Make a motion to return to regular session.
Second.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
Garrett.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
We're missing a couple still. I think we need them.
Talking.
We had to make a presentation.
City Hall roof.
It's torture.
Some Jeopardy music.
Who were the bids from? They didn't say.
I know.
Roofing, sometimes the lowest bid is not the best bid.
Usually it's not.
No, never is.
I can tell you a few stories about that.
Oh, I can tell you stories about coming in behind the low bidder.
And Mr. Anderson, did you want to make a quick presentation about the executive session?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor, council members, you have before you tonight a development agreement with CIMI 3 LLC. Simi, which is really Kincaid, as we know, proposes to construct an approximately 6,700 square foot building on 3 acres just south of Wood End Road at 93rd Street. Mr. Kincaid has requested that the city approve a TIF project plan for this project. Under the TIF project plan, the city would split TIF revenues with Mr. Kincaid 50-50 for up to a 20-year term. However, the 50-50 split with the city would end at such time that the city is reimbursed for its sewer costs. Michael, the sewer costs are estimated to be
About
350,000. So basically, what would happen is Mr. Kincaid builds this building. He has agreed to construct 93rd Street south of Wood End Road. He would be eligible to be reimbursed for his costs of constructing that road, as well as some other TIF eligible costs. The TIF revenues that come in would then be split 50-50. The city would use its money to reimburse itself for that 350,000 of sewer improvements. Mr. Kincaid could use the remainder of the money to reimburse himself for his TIF eligible expenses. The development agreement is basically just an agreement between the city and Mr. Kincaid that this is what we plan to do. We will still need to bring the TIF project plan and the other TIF documents before the city in order to move the plan forward. The development agreement does contemplate some future development south of this parcel. And it basically says that the development costs for the further extension of 93rd Street and the remainder of the sewer costs, in addition to 350,000, can be recovered from future TIF project plans, which we contemplate would cover the additional ground. The recommendation is that the development agreement be approved as is, with the caveat that the city will require a $500 annual contribution to the city's foundation, to the Community Foundation Fund. Happy to take any questions you may have.
I make a motion, we approve the agreement as outlined by Mr. Anderson.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Can I have one more thing?
Yes.
One of the other conditions was joining the chamber too, right?
That is correct. That's in the agreement.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Item number 4, consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for roof repairs and maintenance at Edwardsville City Hall.
Believe you're taking that one, aren't you? Yes. He sneaks away for a week and he thought he was gonna get out of it.
Good evening. I believe Zach prepared the memo there that I believe you have in your packet. I do think the one note in there, the roof replacement was done, I think it was 2015. It was a little more recent than that on the north side. Anyway, a recommendation is that the council consider allowing the city manager to enter into a contract for the replacement of the city hall roof over the south end, and then around the parapet shingles. The submitted base bid costs were range, they had a pretty big range. They were from 64,000 to 130,000. And there was 4 bids received, sealed bids received last week. Basically, the whole south end of this building is leaking above the offices, especially above the court clerk's office. I think maybe some of you have been around when some of that was going on, and it's in a pretty bad place right now where I don't think we have a lot of options. I did work with several of these companies to just discuss our different options of what we could do to keep it as cheap as possible, but it's just an expensive process in general. So, and then I split it into 2 phases. One phase was for the rubber roofing above, I guess it comes up to right here to the south end, this section above us. And then the other section is the parapet around the entire building, the shingles for that. Phase 1 was the rubber roofing. And I don't, do I need to read off all those or? Do I read them all? So I would just suggest, like I said, they range from 132 to 64. I've had recommendations from architects for the low bid, which is Alpha Roofing. So I would suggest that council recommend the city manager enter to a contract for $64,750 for the rubber roofing portion over the south end of City Hall.
I think there's the addition of that 60 or about 4,500 for that deck board. So that had in their bid. In their bid, there was a, make it equivalent, there was a deck board at about $4,500.
They had a deck board on it.
They had to add it to the 60.
On Alpha Roofing?
Yeah. They had it in their bid. They just didn't put it in their base bid. They added it.
Right,
as a
and
separate
so
line.
that would
Good.
include.
Just so we're clear, right?
It could. Okay, yeah. So actually, sorry, that adds $4,389 for a deck board to make it comparable to the other bids that we had. I apologize, I missed that on his bid.
So what's the total on that?
68.
69,739.
That sounds about right.
69,7, what'd you say, 69,749?
39.
39.
I will just to add to that. So we did have them give us also bids for the shingles that are around the parapet roof. So we would have that. We're not recommending doing that at this time. This particular company did include in their bid to replace, there's a few that are missing, right? A handful, and they'll, as part of their bid, they included repairing those few. So we had, when that big windstorm hit a few months ago, it took some shingles off. Probably will happen again. But just based on some of our other discussions, we felt like right now, getting the roof dried in, fixing those few places is our best option. Replace all the shingles all the way around, right? That look like your residential shingles is 25,000 plus. I mean, the bids range from 25 to 50. So, but we're not recommending to do that work at this time, just it's a flat roof.
And would this have a warranty on it?
It
Would the-
does.
20-year, yeah, 20-year warranty.
The flat roof would have a 20-year warranty on it.
Yeah.
What material they use?
Firestone, TPO,
Okay, all right. That's backed by Firestone.
Red Shield, Firestone Red Shield, 20-year warranty.
There will potentially be, so there's also in the bid decking, so there's probably a few areas which we know over there where the metal deck will have to be
Right.
replaced. And it's just a unit price and I don't remember, you know what they were, I think it was $14.50 a square foot.
They're $6.
How
Alpha,
much?
Alpha Roofing, $6 a square foot
Okay.
on the,
So $6 a
Decking.
square foot for their metal deck, which is very reasonable.
That's very
So
reasonable.
they also have the supplies on hand. So not only are they low, but they would also be able to get to the project sooner. They didn't give me an exact schedule, but I know the others would have to order from talking to them. So I think that's a positive too for selecting Alpha. And they were recommended by the architects that we work with, KBS.
Where are they located?
Out of Lawrence.
And Dusty, we've spent thousands and thousands of dollars repairing our flat roof over the years and come back 3 months, 6 months later, and we've having issues again. And I think your pictures show, I mean, well, they
Yeah.
don't show everything.
So
But
part of
it's,
the issue, sorry.
but it's an ongoing health issue, if nothing else as
For
well.
Yeah, in that room where Angela is, it rains in there when it rains out. But part of the problem with the roof is it has that parapet along the south edge, and when it snows or ices, the sun shines and it melts everything on the north end, but the
Right.
drains are on that end. So we would be moving the drains and putting roof drains in 8 feet away from the edge so that it would collect at those points, and hopefully prevent any further of that. Because when you have standing water, even if your roof material said it stands up to standing water, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So we're trying to solve that problem too.
Do you have any other questions?
So the total 69,739.
Yes, 69,739 for the.
I do it, 69,739, and then any deck replacement. We just don't know it. I mean, we know it's
Mhm.
not a lot, but I can't tell you it's
Rusty area.
this much money.
Right. Till they
But
get,
I mean, there will be some deck replacement.
till they get the rubber and the tar ripped off of it.
So, I mean, it's not gonna be significant, but I mean, it could be another 600, 1,000, $2,000.
It's gonna have insulation under it,
It
Dusty,
does not.
doesn't it?
Currently, there's not. The
I know,
deck
I'm
will-
talking about the new one.
Yes,
They're gonna insulate it.
It's not.
that's what the deck board does. It adds a
Yeah, the deck.
Oh,
board's
that's
just
what it was. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
puts
Tapered deck board, okay.
an R30.
So that's where my confusion was. I wasn't gonna do that, I guess, but I was trying to save y'all money. That's what I do.
Well, it's not worth doing if you don't insulate it. It's gonna be the same problem.
I've been in here several times in a number of years, and I have not ever seen this roof get any better. I just see it completely declining through the lifetime of this building. I don't want to do this, but I'm gonna make the motion to approve the 69,739 plus deck repair to do a temporary fix on this roof.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
All right, moving on to item number 5, considering the following items recommended by approval by the Cemetery Parks and Public Spaces Board. Zach, are you presenting this for us?
So it'll actually be a series of decisions for you. The first one being the approval, review and approval of the mowing contract for the cemetery. So we issued kind of a citywide mowing RFP. The portion related to the parks and to the other public spaces and the rights of way, we're going to be working with the Public Works Department to kind of, the way we structured the RFP was we could kind of cherry pick those areas to see what would fit within budget and what makes the most sense from a staffing perspective. So we'll bring that portion back to you likely at our April 11th meeting. So the only thing that's being considered for the mowing contract at this evening's meeting is the mowing contract for the cemetery. So that would include weekly mowing of the city cemetery, as well as the unit pricing quoted here includes up to 6 visits to the historic cemetery for cleanup, brush removal, things of that nature. The low bid in this portion of the contract was White Lawn and Landscape at $11,260 at the unit prices provided. They've performed this service in the cemetery before. They were actually the service provider before Supreme Green. The only reason that they were not awarded the contract in the second for a second 3-year term was because at the time Supreme Green was the low bidder, and Supreme Green was not the low bidder in this instance. We have talked with both White and with the other firms, and they are at least the low bidders in the areas that we're interested in pursuing, and they're fine with holding those prices stable from what was submitted to the other areas that we may, like I said, cherry pick and present at a different date. But the staff recommendation at this point is to move forward with White Lawn and Landscape for the cemetery mowing contract.
Make a motion, we accept we set a contract with White Lawn and Landscape for $11,260 for the year's mowing in the cemeteries.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams. Adams.
Yes.
You don't get to vote, Chuck.
All right, our next item is items, I should say, because it's technically 2 contracts that we're going to be asking for approval. This is related to the Riverfront Park redevelopment project. So the CPPS board has been working on this for a number of months. It's an extension of the Parks and Rec master plan, which was done about 2 years ago at this point, almost 3 years ago. What this stage of the project does is get us to design documents for the area. So what the CPPS board and our consultants at Stantec have been working on is firming up concepts for use of that park. And, you know, and generally speaking, what we've been looking at is trying to encourage the continued passive use of that park. So not to cram it full of amphitheaters or, you know, areas where we're going to have a lot of big activity in that area right south of the residential area. There's some trail expansions, significant improvements to the boat ramp and the fishing amenities out there. Some different nodes for native grasses and flowers and vegetation, which from a staffing perspective are easier to maintain than just a lawn or a dog park. Pedestrian lighting along the section of trail that runs north of the river, kind of a more rustic climbing type playground feature. Again, these are, I should also mention kind of the centerpiece of it that everybody has been excited about is that kind of boardwalk overlook of the trail that would go over the river. And really what has been, you know, the design document stage is not, you know, get us to the point where we're ready to go ahead and build everything and present a whole final package of redevelopment of the entire park. Now, what it does do is get design documents to where we can structure the phasing of this project to the availability of external funding. So what Stantec has done a really good job in is identifying areas of funding outside of the city resources, so state programs, federal programs, grants, potential sponsorship opportunities that would fit within individual pieces of the park. If we have the whole park designed, or at least the design document piece of it, we can kind of structure how we're going to proceed with the project based on the availability and the how likely we are to get some of that funding. So what's up on the board right now are just some of the concepts that were shared with the CPPS board as well as with the public at the mayor's tree lighting ceremony last December. I've got representatives from Stantec here who I'm going to turn it over to real quickly to kind of talk a little bit more about that and share another update that we just got today about the project. So before we go to a decision, I'll ask him to come up.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the time to be here. I just wanted to share some really good news about the park. In February, we submitted it for an award to the American Society of Landscape Architects Prairie Gateway chapter. That chapter extends from the entire state of Kansas, half of the state of Missouri, from Kansas City to Columbia. So, and what they do is each year they submit projects to be considered for an award. So this is our 20-page application that we submitted on behalf of Stantec and the city of Edwardsville. And the great news is just a few hours ago, I heard that we received the Award of Excellence for the project. And that is the highest award you can get for American Society of Landscape Architects. And just to give you an idea how big that is, pretty much every design firm, Kansas City, Wichita, Columbia, all the major cities, they submit anywhere from 1 to maybe 7 or 8 projects to be considered. So kudos to you guys for, allowing us to work with you on a great project. I'll leave this with Zach, so if anybody wants to kind of, peruse through the awards for all levy. And then I'm here to answer any questions, of course, about our contract. Okay.
Yeah, so Kelly will be here in case you have any questions about the project at this point, or, the phase that we're recommending now. It is exciting, and the testament to the work that both Stantec and the CPPS board have done, that this was kind of that received this award. So we're excited to hear that. The cost for what we're talking about is a combined cost of $80,400. This cost was included in the adopted budget for this year under the special sales tax. It would include 2 different contracts, one for surveying with BHC, who's done work with us extensively and is familiar with this park specifically, and then the next contract with Stantec to move forward with the design document portion. Again, what was included in the special sales tax that was adopted for 2022 was $80,000 in contractual services for the parks, assuming that we would be taking this to the next step in some capacity. And as it totaled out, it's about, right on budget where we had estimated it at $80,400. But it will be 2 different authorizations that we'll be asking for you, since it's 2 different contracts.
I think I would just to add, we know this is a big project in Stantec. So again, we're looking at the design in whole, right? But the project will almost for certain get developed in some phases. We can't necessarily say where that phase will start and end yet, because we need some of the information that comes out of the design process. But right, I mean, it's probably not likely we're going to build the overlook in phase 1, just because there's so many other pieces that have to be supported to it. But maybe a large grant comes along and it's all about building trails and overlooks. It could be phase 1, but I think right now we think probably phase 1 is fundamentally kind of the support pieces, right? The entrance, the parking areas, the restrooms, the kind of making sure the sewers available, all those kind of pieces, more so than probably a lot of fixture development at this point. Now, again, they're doing a great job working on opportunities for grants, whether it's matching, they're all going to have some matching, but they're, we're talking about, there's foundations, there's other groups that support that. There's, groups that do native trails. There's groups that support native grasses or butterflies or, things like that. So we're trying to capture all of those opportunities, but to get to those, we gotta have to get past this first step, which obviously you gotta have surveying to work from, and then the design. And I think if I read correctly, the surveying part's 21,500 and the design development's 58,900, and that's how you get to the 80,000.
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion on the most exciting part of it, which is the Stantec development, that we approve the 58,900 to move forward with that design phase. And this is a commentary. I've had the privilege of sitting in a lot of meetings with them, and they've done a great job, really listened to the community and kind of stretched us a little bit on our thought process on the committee. So kudos to you.
I'll second that.
I did have a quick question, Zach, on the design piece of it. And I don't think this would have to do with the survey as much. If we don't incorporate all of the aspects in the design, even maybe in the entrance with the street, because I know that's a big part of phase 1, Does that affect this cost, or is that something that would need to be adjusted before?
That, I think
Yeah.
those, some of those details would likely be sussed out in this portion of it as far as how it's going to be designed. So if you're talking about the, the approach and realignment of the driveway and kind of those aspects of it, which I think you're referring to.
Yeah.
That would, I don't think that would affect the cost of what we're proposing now. It would affect the cost of, the project once it comes to those, putting together those kind of construction documents. If those were gonna, we have, so for everybody's benefit, Stantec did provide some really preliminary high-level estimates as to the cost for these different pieces. And so the design document development piece of it will kind of put a finer point to that. So when we actually are going out for bids for construction on individual pieces, we'll have that in hand. And I think that's what you're referring to. So if any of those aspects change within the design piece of it, it'll affect that ultimate cost of what they had
Yeah,
presented.
to an extent is I just didn't necessarily want a whole lot of time spent on the engine piece, if that might be something that's adjusted to save a chunk of money.
And there's going to be a series of meetings between staff and Stantec to kind of, like I said, suss out some of those details as far as what we're going to have them focus on.
Any other questions before? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
And again, this is the motion to second for approval of the Stantec contract. Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
So the next recommendation would be to approval of the contract with BHC for surveying services for this project.
That's for the 21.5.
Yes, sir.
I make the motion to authorize city manager to enter into a contract with BHC for surveying services, 21,500.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll hit the ground running with Stantec. Thanks, Kelly, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Remember the mushrooms.
We get some discounts on that.
Yeah, one of the.
You mentioned dollars.
I don't say anything.
That was on the consent agenda. All right, item number 6, consider recommendation of denial from the Planning Commission regarding a special use permit for an electrical substation located at 10411 Riverview Avenue.
And we're going to do this. So Bradley, our planner, is going to kind of give you the overview of the case and the actions through the Planning Commission. Then I'm going to go through some of the rest of the agenda memo with you, and then we'll carry it from there.
Good evening, sorry. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The item before you concerns a request for a special use permit for the construction of an electrical substation. The applicant who is here this evening is Evergy Metro Inc. So as Michael said, I will do a little bit of the background and then we'll move forward from there. On December 1st, 2021, the applicant filed an application for a special use permit related to the construction of an electrical substation on approximately 45 acres of land located at 10411 Riverview Avenue, with the intent of increasing the load capacity and reliability of Evergy's electrical system in Edwardsville in the surrounding area that was previously served by KCP&L, shown here shaded in orange. The applicant currently purchases energy from BPU to supply its customers' needs. Additional development near the Legends and north of I-70 is projected to grow at a rate where BPU can no longer supply the needs of the applicant and its customers in Edwardsville. Approximately 2 acres of the 45-acre property will be used for the substation. Any future improvements beyond this area would require review and approval from the governing body. The site was selected based on its proximity to the existing Metropolitan to Maywood South transmission line, which is intended to be connected to the substation. That line can be seen on the green line there. A final connection route has yet to be determined at this time. However, the applicant has provided 3 preliminary alignment concepts. Alignment 1, shown in yellow, is the most direct route. Alignment 2, shown in purple, travels north to Riverview Avenue and east to South 98th Street. And alignment 3, shown in orange, goes south to Richland Avenue, over to 102nd Street, and south of Kansas Avenue. The property is located in the AGR Agricultural Residential Zoning District and currently contains 8,700 square foot barn with living quarters, 2 storage buildings, and according to the county appraiser's property record card, is primarily used for agricultural purposes. The surrounding property is primarily used for large lot, single family residential, and or agricultural purposes. The nearest residence is located approximately 550 feet southwest of the center of the proposed substation location. Please note that this is a correction from the February 16th staff report and was addressed during the public hearing. Additionally, staff analyzed the total number of primary residential structures within a 2,000-foot radius. Of the 34 structures observed, 24 or 70% were found to be located between 1,500 and 2,000 feet from the site. The proposed substation will be accessed via Riverview Avenue by way of an improved gated access drive. The dimensions of the proposed substation are approximately 375 feet by 250 feet, all of which will be within a secured fence line. The tallest equipment inside the fence line will be approximately 35 feet tall. The poles that connect to the transmission lines will range in height from 65 feet to 75 feet tall. Yard lights will be manually controlled and have light footprints focused at and inside the fence line. Lights will only be lit under emergency conditions. The proposed substation will not generate or produce a product, nor any fume, odor, smoke, or vibration. Its main purpose is to transform power from a higher voltage to a lower voltage and control the power flow to other substations in the area. With the exception of emergency maintenance and repairs, the substation will be unmanned. Any work on the site will be performed during normal business hours, except during emergencies. On January 19th, 2022, the Planning Commission was to hold a public hearing in regard to this item. However, the item was deferred due to a lack of quorum, and additional notice was given to those in attendance regarding the rescheduling of the hearing. In light of the decision to defer the meeting, the applicant elected to field questions from the public. On February 16th, 2022, the Planning Commission held the rescheduled public hearing where city staff, the applicant, and members of the public all spoke. Objections to the proposed use were voiced as part of the public hearing, including concerns regarding the location of the proposed site, potential adverse effects on surrounding properties from noise, lighting, and views of the proposed substation, and the potential to depreciate property values. In analyzing the merits of any SUP, the zoning ordinance identifies 13 golden criteria for review. After consideration of the staff recommendations and comments from the applicant and members of the public, the Planning Commission recommended denial of the SUP with a 4-2 vote based on the following criteria. Number 1, the proposed use or SUP is not consistent with the district classification intent of the zoning district. Number 2, the proposed use or SUP will have a detrimental effect on nearby properties. And finally, number 3, the proposed use or SUP is not in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. The motion also included a statement to the City Council that the Planning Commission believes the special use would adversely affect surrounding property by reducing or depreciating property values of such surrounding properties, which is the basis of denial consideration by the City Council. In light of the recommendation by the Planning Commission, staff would recommend City Council to consider the following comments regarding its acceptance or denial of the SUP.
Mayor and council, thank you. I would note that we do have representatives from Evergy here tonight because this was not a public hearing. They're here to answer questions, but not to make necessarily presentation. So everybody has equal opportunities here. I think that Bradley did an excellent job of doing an overview of the project. Certainly, this is one of those projects that I think always generates a lot of comments and concerns. And, you know, our role or your role as the council is really to decide if this project meets the requirements for a special use permit. So again, you had basically 3 items on the planning commission that they brought up. The first one about not being consistent with district classification and intent of the zoning district. I would note that this district is ag residential, and these types of facilities are a permitted use. So they're permitted with a special use permit. So we need to remember that we're not doing a zoning change. So we're not trying to change the zoning from ag residential to some other use. It's a matter of there's a permitted use, but that permitted use requires special considerations or conditions to basically operate in that area. An example I've often given is, and I know it's not exactly the same, but where you have restaurants and they have outside dining in those types of situations, and they may be near a residential area. And so the restaurants are permitted use, but they want to now have outside dining, and it says in that ordinance that you got to have it as a special use. And what they're trying to control is things such as loud noises, right? The time of sales of alcohol, things of that nature. And they say, we're going to let you use the outside area subject to these conditions, these special uses. And so we're in the same arena when we're talking about special uses here. So I provided to you the definition on page 3 or 104, whichever way you want to look at it, of what our ordinance says is a special use. And I will just read it for purposes of the record. It says, a special use is a use that would not be appropriate generally or without restriction throughout the zoning district, but which, if controlled as to the number, area, location, or relationship to the neighborhood, would promote the public health, safety, welfare, morals, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, prosperity, or the general welfare. Such uses may be permitted in such zoning districts as specific uses if specific provisions for such special uses are made in these regulations. So we're really talking about what are those special uses, what are those provisions. Again, relative to whether it's a permitted use, which is kind of the first item, was saying it's not consistent with the district classification. I would just say it is a permitted use. So I don't know that it's inconsistent. I understand use of a substation to residential uses often, we lost our map, can be one of those things that people want to look at and consider, and it should be. The second one, which is probably the one that really generates the most interest and is the hardest to determine, is that it will have a detrimental effect on nearby properties. So it really has 2 questions that I point out here. Well, what is a nearby property, right? I mean, we have one property owner that spoke. That is the nearest property, right, relative to a physical building to the physical substation of 550 feet. That probably would be considered nearby. Is a property here nearby? Probably not. Are properties that are adjacent to it nearby? I think you could say they are. So there's no clear definition of what a nearby property is. So is 2,000 feet nearby? I mean, there's just not a good, clean answer to that. And then the second part of that question is that it'll have a detrimental effect. And so I and and I spoke with the city attorney, tried to find, is there a clean definition in a zoning case that says X, Y, and Z is detrimental? Well, some things are pretty clear, right? Fumes, odors, pollution, erosion from stormwater. You could have an ag use. I used the dairy farm example once. I mean, if you've ever been around a dairy farm, they do not smell good, but they're an ag use, but how do you control it? So those could be detrimental to the property. Property value is one of those, and I know that was raised this evening. So how do we address those types of items? I do know that tonight there were several comments made about poles and wires. I'm going to caution that we're not making a decision on transmission lines, nor do we have the authority to make those. That is clearly within the jurisdiction of the Kansas Corporation Commission and a utility company, right? So we don't have authority to say, you'll put your pole here and you'll put your pole here and you'll put your pole here. That is in the purview of the energy company and the state corporation commission. So we're not making decisions on a route or a location of poles. Clearly, any substation has to get tied to a transmission line, that this Mayfield line. So wherever it's located at, whether it goes west or east or somewhere else, you're going to have some connection from there to that substation. It's just part of the electric grid, and then out of the substation, it's going to go on smaller poles that we see. And I'm sure lots of y'all have driven, Parallel Parkway was on there today. There's transmission lines on there, and there's service lines on there, and they're big poles. So there's no doubt about it. The third area is this conformance with the comprehensive plan. So I think the comment was made that it's not in compliance with our comprehensive plan, but our comprehensive plan specifically states that public utilities, whether public or privately owned or managed, are essential to promoting the health and safety of the community. The availability of these services in addition to transportation networks is often a key indicator of where growth or development will occur. Edwardsville is served by outside entities, either public or private, for utility services, with the exception of its wastewater system, which is owned and operated by us. So again, when we think about the comprehensive plan and we look at those definitions, that's what we have to look to, because in Kansas specifically, you have to have a comprehensive plan in order to have zoning. So I'm going to shift a little bit from zoning and go to what specifically in your court is the issue of a special use permit. Only the city council issues a special use permit. You get advice from the planning commission. So they held the public hearing, they took input, they then shipped that to you for a final decision. And generally, as shown in here, there's a number of items that you should look to. Some of these are pretty clear, some of these are not so clear. First one is that there's adequate ingress and egress to the property. I think it would be fair to say that there's adequate ingress and egress to the property. They have a way to get to it from a primary road. It's a gated structure, so that off-street parking and loading areas. Well, in this case, we don't have off-street parking or loading areas. I mean, when they need to come to the site, it's probably one or two trucks. They do have to make appropriate design for our fire apparatus, right? So if for some reason we were called to this site for a medical emergency or fire emergency, we have to be able to get our vehicles in there. We have to be able to get our vehicles out of there. So that is addressed. Refuse and service areas. I mean, this doesn't really generate any garbage to speak of. Utilities. I think it's fair to say this would have its own utilities there, so it's really not. The next one, I think, is one where there is some purview, and there's been some discussion both at the planning commission and subsequent. So I will say, I know there was a comment about changing the agenda. I'm not sure I know what that is, but at the planning commission, there were certainly comments made about these items that we're talking about, and Evergy provided additional information for your consideration, which is what was put into your packet. So and staff had discussions about those items. You know, what are you providing? What do you want to provide? You know, and you need to provide that to us so it can be included in the packet. So, you know, screening and buffering. So there's a question, right? Is it, you have this substation, how will it be screened and buffered from those adjoining properties? You know, the one property that was raised here tonight, I mean, I think any of us could go up there, stand in the driveway, you can see where that substation would be. And if you're sitting in the substation, you could see that house. There's no doubt. We have other properties that have been mentioned up here that have lots of trees, existing trees in and around their property. That may be natural screening, and it serves the purpose of screening their physical view there. Yes, if I walk through the trees and I stand on the property line, I'm gonna see it. But there's no doubt about that. But what level of screening should be imposed to make it more compatible with the uses? Signs and exterior lighting. So signs isn't really an issue here. I think lighting was an issue that was raised, as I understood. Initially, they talked about having basically, you know, dusk to dawn lighting. So in other words, when it got dark, the lights came on, they stayed on all night. You've probably driven past some substations. I hope if you had an opportunity to go past some and be around them, and they can be very bright. And I would say this community typically enjoys having that rural darkness around, right? I mean, we've had the discussions about why aren't there street lights in some subdivisions and things. And in a lot of cases, people say, I don't want those street lights out there because I don't want that light, right? And so I think that is a reasonable item to consider, and whether or not having lights that are only switched on versus dawn or dusk to dawn is an appropriate adjustment. Required yards and other open spaces. I mean, obviously there's a great deal of open spaces on the additional 45 acres. It's set back from all of the property lines 100 feet or more. So, I mean, I think that there's there. The general compatibility with adjacent properties and other properties in the district. I think that's, you know, again, it's subjective. You're going to have to make that decision, whether it's compatible. I think they've shown you pictures, and we've done our own research. I mean, we have substations in industrial areas. We have substations in residential areas. You have substations in retail commercial areas. So, I mean, substations tend to be in a lot of areas because you have to have them where you need the power to serve the community. The next item about special use, and again, this is one I think is very important for consideration tonight. It says the special use shall not adversely affect, reduce, or depreciate property values of land and property surrounding the same, whether or not immediately adjoining when devoted to the permitted uses. Now, staff tried to look at this item as objectively as we could. So there was the information provided by Evergy. There was another one we looked at because it was a fairly new one. I think there was some comments about this when it came out, the Piper substation and how it was located, which was built prior to a residential subdivision. What did those property values? So we tried to provide you with data on that. Right? I know there's been discussions tonight that there's a reduction of 10 to 40%. I don't know that we have anything that we can definitively look to and say, if you build a substation, there will be a depreciation. We just don't, staff doesn't have that information. So if it's out there and can be considered, that's great. We just don't have that information. And then the C and D about height. I mean, relative to height regulations, that's not really an issue here. Obviously, poles are what pole heights are, but we don't regulate height of utility poles. We just don't have the authority to regulate height of utility poles. And clearly, this is not a special use permit that's temporary in nature, right? I mean, once this decision is made, if it were to be approved, it's a permanent. I mean, it's a permanent feature. I mean, these are long-term types of items. So I think I hopefully have hit those. Again, I think we spoke to the issues of screening and buffering. We've spoken about exterior lighting. We have spoken about the adjacent properties and what could be done to try to assess that. We provided some information on property values. And then we have given you in each of those that the applicant, if it were approved, they would be subject to conditions. And we spelled out those conditions. So, right. So they can't just say, well, we'll put in buffering. They have to do it and they have to provide us a plan that gets approved. Right. So it's a condition of the special use permit. We've also suggested 2 additional conditions. One of those is to work with us if in fact there's going to be utility poles along Riverview, because you got to distribute this power. We know that right of way is something that's needed. It could be some of these other areas. We want to work collectively with the utility company because we want to minimize the impact. Right? So we don't want to have right of way and then easements on top of the right of way that starts pushing it out farther. I mean, we hear a lot, people don't want to have things close to their house. So typically utilities and right of way can work together. Right? So we have telephone, we have power, we have gas, we have water, we have sewer, all that stays within the right of way, and the road maybe takes up 30 or 40% of a right of way typically. Sidewalks and all those other things underground that we don't see, most of it is inside the right of way. An issue that has been an issue for us for some time is when we built our lift station that provides sewer service to that northern area for future development. It was developed with the intent of it being 3-phase power. There was some maybe lack of communications of where that power was and what it was going to take to get there. So we had to revise our plans and use single phase. And again, I'm not the electrician, but basically it means that lift station can't be fully operational or as efficient as it should be. So it costs more money to operate it. And that's true of all of these, I mean, when you start building things, subdivisions, things like that, this 3-phase power is what it takes to serve those areas. I would note, because this map is a good indication and it gives some history. So the area in blue is what we used to know as the West Star area. So you'll recall there were West Star and then there was KCP&L. So everything in the blue area is West Star service area, which includes all of our industrial area, right? And that area has a substation at basically 98th Street and K32, just to the south of there. And it provides all the 3-phase power down there. But it doesn't have a capacity to provide power into the old KCP&L area. So KCP&L area serves Edwardsville and portions of Bonner Springs, goes a little bit farther to the west, but basically the same area that's been provided by KCP&L for many years. The green area is BPU. This substation can't serve BPU service area. They're just, right, they don't have a legal right to go serve there. And technically BPU is only serving through Evergy, right? They buy power from them to serve this area, but BPU has made a statement, from all I understand, that because of the loads that they have now, so development that's happened in Kansas City, Kansas, is requiring them to cut our part, this brown part, off of their service, which means that KCP&L or Evergy has to be able to provide that power, and substations are part of that issue. So in staff's purpose isn't to be here to advocate for or against an application. We're not here to make an application for or against. You have a recommendation from the Planning Commission. We hope to provide you additional information. At the end of this, you really have 3 decisions. You can either, 1, accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission, which is a recommendation of denial, not issue a special use permit. You could remand this back to the Planning Commission. I think there was a comment made that maybe there's new information. Would that new information change the decision of the Planning Commission? I don't know. It's possible, right? So you may feel there's enough new information that it needs to be further vetted, and you could recommend that back. The only thing we would say is you need to be clear what it is that you want them to vet. So it's not just send it back, let's see what they say, a future time. We need to be clear into our directions. That does not necessarily mean that's a new public hearing. It means it goes back to that body to consider whatever new evidence you think they need to consider. And then they would send back a new recommendation, which could be the same recommendation or a different recommendation. And of course, the final item is you could choose to approve the special use permit. In all of those situations, it's a governing body vote. So the governing body includes the mayor, and it requires a 4 votes to the affirmative, whichever one of those is, right? So a 3-3 doesn't pass, right? It takes 4 votes to the affirmative. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. We do have the applicant here. Again, I felt it was important for fairness to everybody that if there's questions for the applicant, those should come from you all. If we can't answer that question, we will ask the applicant to answer that question. I don't know if Lisa has anything else to add from just a pure legal standpoint on this one, but I think we've got it covered. Okay.
I have a question. Okay, explain to us why you're not looking at the old Osmond property where they're going to build, it's in Bonner Springs, where they're going to build 2, maybe 3 Amazon style buildings. It's zone commercial, it's Bonner Springs. Why are you looking there, not there, and looking here?
So I think the question, and I'll let y'all, whoever wants it, is why would you locate a substation? Why do you locate a substation at a particular location versus?
Well, in a residential area versus a commercial area.
Right. And I think there's a couple races, so I'll let them answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name's Richard Good, and I live over Topeka. So I think the best I can tell you is that we try to do the thing that we think impacts the local communities the least amount. So, and I think that the area you're talking about is what's the Medline facility?
Yes.
Okay, over on that quarter section or on that roadway. And yeah, we could build a substation over there. I still have to come back to the green line on this map and pick up power for the substation. And so in that case, then I've got to build what's at least another mile or mile and a half across more people to get that big line all the way across there.
You're gonna stop you for just, I'm not ignorant, I just don't see colors, so point out the green line. I'm sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, thanks. You mean the yellow line? The yellow line? Okay, I'm good.
And then, yeah, those are their 3 proposed routes.
And Mike's my designated point.
Yeah, I'm terrible. Okay,
So-
sorry.
So that's all right. So Councilman, so on the one that we've done here, and of course, we think the yellow line that runs straight west over to the subsite from the green line is the one that would make the most sense because it happens to be the shortest and most direct. It's only about 3,000 feet. It gets there pretty quickly. We've only literally got about 3 property owners to work with on that particular route. If we come down and come in on Kansas Avenue and kind of follow that roadway on Richland, a lot more property owners, a lot more poles will be on the roadway. We have a lot of narrow roadways in this area to work with, and it probably makes sense for both of us not to put those poles necessarily on the edge of the right of way or right off of it on these narrow roads. So, and we've also looked at Riverview, the kind of purple, light purple line up there, and that's an option. But Riverview's kind of up and down and all over in that stretch, and is going to make some things pretty challenging there. And we're going to be right in some people's front yards if we come down that road with those large poles. That's just where we have to be by the time, because we would buy easements for that particular line. We buy easements for the transmission line. So. That answer your question?
Yeah,
Mr.
it,
Bishop?
yeah, but it, why
I
not
think
go
to
closer?
Yeah, to summarize it, I mean, it's wherever you, the farther you move that location, you have more transmission line, which I think it's the discussion. So now you're in the big poles versus the smaller poles, which are distribution. So that part of.
I mean, why can't you move it closer to 435? Though that would cut down on, that would, I mean,
Right.
that would ease a lot of the expense of the giant poles and it would be closer to the green line there.
On 435?
Yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of vacant land over there.
there is some. It's, and you're talking about the substation now with that question? Is that what you're asking
Yeah,
me?
scooching it over.
Okay. There's a lot of that's got some pretty uneven terrain over on that east side. And it's not impossible to build a substation there, but it's certainly more challenging. So.
I think the challenging thing for us and for the landowners in the area of the proposed site is it's been that way for forever. You know, it's farmland, and I think Mrs. Gortenberg said it, at 30 years that she's been there with her family, if not longer. I would hope that there was other alternative locations that a substation could go in for Edwardsville, instead of in a residential setting type like that. And I saw your photographs of Olathe and other areas, and I understand that. But there's a big concrete walls around it, which kind of helps on the noise, kind of helps on the electromagnetic fields as well, I would think. But I would just hope that there was more research on other locations that wouldn't affect, our citizens so much. We understand we need power and we need that, but it looks like this location is really good, not just for Edwardsville, but it's really benefits Bonner Springs as well. And I'm not opposed to that, but to uproot some of our citizens, their livelihood to help local cities, I don't know if we can make that, or I can make that decision. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Good, you and I have spoken, and I mentioned a couple other alternative locations at the corner of Riverview and 98th Street. And also right along I-70 next to our sewer lift station. Have those two been under consideration at all?
Yeah, we've looked at both of those, Mr. Adams, and the thing that would concern us, and we could go around on 70 and follow the KDOT right away around to the north. Most communities frown on that when we talk about that because it's along that main thoroughfare coming through town there. And our poles really start to stick out above the horizon when you're putting them on that, it's kind of like this, but it's got some really high points and those poles are going to be really tall. And so we try to stay away from that along those main roads that come into town if we can.
My daughter lives in Lewisburg, and when we go down, we see the power lines go down 69 highway and actually cross over the highway over to the station. And I think, me personally, it's a much better option alongside a highway like that. And at the property at 98th and Riverview, actually, there would be almost no large poles. It would be all distribution poles going down Riverview as opposed to any of the high voltage poles. So I completely understand the logic of putting it where it is. It's visually hidden from most of the city. Unfortunately, there's a couple of houses that doesn't, and I would have a view of it from my place.
You would.
And so, but I understand the thinking is try to hide it, try to get it out of most people's view. The challenges coming into it and out of it. The yellow line concerns for me are you're going across at least one property that's 300 feet wide. And so if I remember right, you said that the right of way would be 100 feet. So you're going to take a third of their property that would have, there would be basically no options for them to build a house or to put a major, a major building or anything in that area. Is that correct?
The only addition I'd add to that is that in those situations, we normally split it and try to put the line down the property line so there's 50 feet on each side that are contributed to the easement, so that it doesn't impact any one person so much.
The challenge is through that area, there's some 100-foot wide properties. So, that's a concern for me.
I was going to mention as well, we have our chair from planning and zoning. If anyone had any questions on the council, I had a couple of questions in reviewing the packet today, as opposed to attending the meeting, and just some of the criteria that was included in the motion. And so I was just wondering, Mr. Altavo, if you would just clarify what that motion consisted of for the denial.
Yeah, the motion as it was presented here was actually rejected during our last meeting as not being an accurate reflection of the motion that I submitted. I've emailed each of you my notes on that I made in the process of making that motion. And they were far more substantial than what was presented to you this evening. And I can also tell you, as a realtor who had listings where we were in sight of these transmission lines, I had a client that had two of them, brand new in Lenexa, and they were both unsaleable, and he had to move into one for a substantial period of time, and the other one he had to rent out until he could make a profit on it. It was so devastating to the values on it. But I can go through for those of you who haven't seen the reasoning, and go through why I made that motion, if you wish, or if
If
not.
you could quick, yeah, just in a nutshell.
Okay, it's basically three phases, and two of them come out of the special use permit, and the third comes out of the golden criteria. And I included the golden criteria because even though we're not doing rezoning here, it does represent the legal thinking in this state on legal reasoning for doing this. I would point out, and I also sent maps from our plan. And it's not so much what's there now, it's what are we going to put there in the future if we put this thing right in the middle of a residential area and then run these transmission lines across there. Who's going to want to put anything else there? So you basically, at that point, if this is accepted at that location, we're going to have to completely rewrite our use plan for the future, because it's simply not going to work as a low density residential after that. I would also point out that the location of the substation, it was sort of misleading in the thing that it was represented as mixed use and ag, but low use residential, is that the portion that it's actually on is solely on residential. There's a thin strip in our future map of mixed use, which would be, for instance, for a subdivision, you could put the swimming pool there, the clubhouse, something of that nature. But the part where the substation is actually at is solely residential. That's for that. So anyway, I went through this, and on our special use, I took into consideration requirements may be made more stringent if there are potentially injurious effects which may be anticipated upon other property in the neighborhood or contrary to the welfare and convenience of the public. That's under paragraph C on page 5. And the things that I considered there was the coverage and height of buildings. Now, what I had in mind there is that, yeah, we can't regulate these transmission lines. That's the problem. Once you dump that there, you're going to have to put up these transmission lines that he's talking about. And those are even more deleterious to property values than what the subdivision would be. So that's why I keep that. And you have to consider that portion of it because you have no control over it. They can put this whatever and then use eminent domain to take the land. So that part comes in. requiring screening, fencing, and landscaping. I believe they asked for a variance on that. And they were also going to use barbed wire, which during one of our training sessions was pointed out by our city manager that that could be a reason for denying a special use. The environmental standards for air, water pollution and whatnot, there's been testimony regarding noise and things of that nature. So I included that in. Then on the golden rules, would the change in district classification be consistent with the purposes? Something might be permissible, but still not be appropriate. There are a lot of things that are permissible these days, but we still think they're inappropriate. And I felt that this would be inappropriate at that location. Character and condition of the surrounding neighborhood. Residential, low density residential, agricultural. And we plan for it to be low density residential into the future. What are the uses of property nearby and their district classification? Again, ag, low density residential. So again, inappropriate. Is the subject property, that's not that. Would the uses permitted by the proposed district and the accompanying restrictions have its detrimental effect on nearby property? And the answer to that is obviously yes. I mean, there's no way you can do this and not have it be detrimental to those properties. And finally, would the proposed amendment be in conformance with the comprehensive plan? And no, we'd have to completely rewrite that because there's no way you're gonna put the kinds of subdivisions in there that we planned for once you put this in there and those transmission lines. The third part of it goes to section 4 on page 6 of the zoning regulations, particularly subparagraph A8, general compatibility with adjacent properties and other property in the district. Obviously not. And then in paragraph B, special use shall not adversely affect, reduce, or depreciate property values of land and property surrounding the same, whether or not immediately adjoining when devoted to permitted uses. Obviously, again, that's going to have an adverse effect on those properties and on the future properties that we would like to see up there. And then in paragraph C, special use shall be in compliance with height and area regulations of the district in which same is located. Again, we have no authority over that. Once we put that there, we have no authority over where they put those lines. And then finally in D, in the case of special uses granted for the indefinite term, the relation to the reasonably foreseeable future for the entire term of such special use and completed development of the district shall be considered. Again, once you put that there, what are you going to put around it? You're certainly not going to put $300,000 and $400,000 houses underneath the transmission line. So that's what we sort of had in mind for that area. And again, my listings were in Lenexa. So I've seen these, I've seen what it does to the property value. So that in essence is the entirety of the motion that I made.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay,
Did anyone else have questions
Any
for
questions on that?
planning and zoning?
Just one minor bit. There is a difference between zoning and the future land use
Right.
idea or thought process, just to clarify.
Right.
We don't want to get those two mixed up.
Did council have any other questions for? I had a couple of questions
Okay.
for Evergy as far as the lines go, and that's specifically the difference between the 70-foot poles and the regular distribution lines. And I know we're not making a determination on the poles, but as our city manager stated before, we don't, once we approve the substation, then that's it. So we don't get to talk about the poles after that. And so could you just explain where the 70-foot poles would go and which ones would be distribution?
The taller 70 foot or maybe even taller some would go along whatever route we chose to come from the green line to the substation. So that could be that line there, the purple, the yellow, or the more orange, I'll call it down there, that follows Richmond. And that's the way we get to the sub with the power. That's one of the reasons that we prefer this side over going back to the other side of 435, because it's closer to the load and where development's going to be in this general area. And as a company, we've already got other commercial businesses that have an interest in some of that, including, I think, the one there where the north of Riverview there on the east side, one that's Village South. Those we've had recent contacts with people that are interested in power. So, and we literally don't have any three-phase electricity used at all in this area right now. It's all single phase. We have some poles there at the new cul-de-sac that can handle three-phase, but they're only operating with one-phase energized. But we need to get three-phase up there in that area. Mike mentioned this, but BPU has asked us to get off their system by the end of 23. And for building the substation and getting all this work done, that's getting to be pretty short schedule at this point.
And would you mind just clarifying, because I remember that from before, who was the contact from BPU that requested that Evergy be off?
I don't remember. That's been a year ago. So.
The council might have other questions or comments coming up. I think in just hearing from several citizens and hearing you, and I understand that with future development, there are very likely going to be needs for higher power and more power in our area.
Mm-hmm.
My concern just being if this is the best location for it. I did a little bit of research and just looking comparatively. I remember from the planning and zoning meeting, listening to the folks answer questions, and the folks from Evergy were really kind to stick around and answer a lot of questions. But they said primarily the energy from the substation would be servicing the Bonner development and Urban Outfitters and KCK. And so the folks in Edwardsville are asking, well, why are we using our land for that? I'm looking at Edwardsville is 9.3 miles squared. That's all we've got. We can't expand. I've asked around about it, and we don't have anyone donating their land to us. Bonner is 16 miles squared, and KCK is 128 miles squared. And so when we're looking at that little amount of land that we have to do the best we can with it, I think our neighbors are wondering if this is the best use for that spot. Not to say that there's not a good spot for it and we don't need it, but would it be the best spot for it when our future plans for that area are looking at more of maybe an upscale neighborhood with estate or acre size lots or more? And I don't know that those higher end ones would want to be built right under those lines or right next to a substation. When we're looking at the poles coming in and looking at 100 feet gaps between it, some of those, Joe and I were looking over the maps earlier, and some of those lots are only 100 feet wide. They're long lots, they're acreage, but 100 feet wide. And if we're taking 50 and saying, well, now you can't build a barn there potentially, or do what you want with your land, that's really concerning for our neighbors. I've been in real estate for 19 years personally, and so I have my own thoughts and opinions, but I thought, let's just kind of reach out and get some other ideas on how this would affect property, the buyers looking for property.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to reach out to 83 realtors. I just asked for your typical buyer in a typical market. How would an electrical substation in close proximity to a home affect their likelihood of making an offer? And I just said visible, like you can see it from the home. Those responses, 10% of them said it wouldn't bother them. They'd go ahead and make a strong offer. 10% said they would make an offer, but at a reduced price because of the substation. And 90% said they'd find another property altogether. And so that was concerning to me, and not just, hey, this is my opinion, but these are people working with buyers in our metro area on a day-to-day basis and representing them and showing them homes. And who did a little bit more digging on, besides just peer review, an article on power lines and property value by Jacqueline DeMarco. This was published in June 23rd, 2021. They said a 2018 study from the Journal of Real Estate Research found that vacant lots near high voltage power lines sell for 44.9% less than equivalent lots that aren't located near power lines. It says if you take a step back, a lot that's located within 1,000 feet of transmission lines tend to sell for 17.9% less. And so again, when we're looking at, does this depreciate? That was one of our city manager's questions. Well, does it depreciate or not? How do we tell? This is just how I'm looking at it. And then when I looked at our comprehensive plan, our philosophy for future land use states, despite Edwardsville proximity to Kansas City and the excellent access to the metropolitan market, Edwardsville has retained a small town feel. Residents of Edwardsville have expressed a strong desire for the preservation of the small town values, rural character, and beauty of their town. However, residents and business owners have also expressed a strong desire for growth, new businesses, more housing options, proactive codes enforcement, and additional services to support existing and future development needs. Proposed development and improvement should be carefully evaluated to ensure compliance with both of these goals. And so I can see again where we are going to need some energy for some of that use. But then I'm looking at the housing options and what type of housing, and we are already made up of pushing 50% of rental housing. So we're looking for more of owner-occupied housing on the north end, where we have room to grow. And would that support that, the owner-occupied housing? Then the land use goals. This is the following goals. This is again in our comprehensive plan. The following goals have been defined by Edwardsville for land use. Maintain Edwardsville's natural environment and rural characteristics through the preservation of open space, while also promoting quality urban intensity of development and designated growth areas that will enhance the community's small town values and rural character. And then the second part of that is ensure that the physical development is constructed in a visually pleasing and context correct manner. And so just in those, again, I'm looking at and saying, okay, I can see the future and the vision and where we're going to need some power in the future. But when Councilman Adams had brought up, hey, why aren't we looking at going along the highway instead of right in our neighbors' yards? That made some sense to me, and I understand your perspective, and your guys' job is to be the most cost efficient for your company, and I can definitely appreciate that. But I'm up here, and a lot of us are up here because we've been elected by our neighbors to look out for them, and that's just those are the concerns that I found and that I feel have been communicated to me.
This is just one minor thing. I don't know where that plot of land is by I-70, but you've mentioned it a couple times.
Just the right of way, like KDOT right of way.
The only problem is, and I'm not saying anything, the only problem is we cannot cross 435 straight because of the KDOT right of way and the interchange. Because that green line on the east side there, see how it goes out and around it? Because we're limited on what we can and can't do on 435. There's regulations on where we can and how much of the right of way we can cross.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to come, even if we followed along 70, we would have to come down and then go over. So that's one of the things we kind of looked at is the number of property owners as well. And we would be affecting, and I don't know what's up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not 100% aware of this area, but we would have to come back down and go into the line past the 435 interchange. So I just want to make that clear. And that's probably one of the reasons why we didn't look at that plot as much, is because of the added turns and land that we would have to cross.
And I think, and it might be something that you guys are able to look at and bring back to us. But in my recollection of that area of our city, and it's right close to KCK as well, is there are hardly any homes right there along 98th Street and 435. And so even if we came under the highway and then scooted out toward I-70, you could almost avoid the homeowners altogether. And it might be worth looking into for a solution that would be a good fit for everybody.
Can't go underground primaries.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean underground. I just meant under the highway. Like where the bridge is. Yeah, sorry.
I don't know that staff, I think you're addressing the complexities of the issue, right? And again, from a staff standpoint, we try to look at what facts that we have before us. Things been said tonight that I hadn't heard before either. So, when we try to put things in the report, we try to make it as factual as possible so you have the information, to make decisions. I think I can say this in the sense of speaking about BPU and getting off their system, because I have been in numerous meetings myself with Greg Kendall from Wine.edc about power needs in this area broadly, right? I'm not talking about the site, but that there's been kind of an ongoing challenge between, having access to power, and power, good or bad, substations are part of that system. And how do we, where's the right place for it is kind of what you're talking about. Whether the question is, do we need additional power access, whether it's for, we have a residential subdivision that's looking, right? And three-phase power is going to be an absolute for there. So it's not, I don't want to go out of here and say, well, it's all for one project or some other project. It's about power for the area. Where's the right place for the substation? We don't try to tell an applicant, any applicant, good or bad. We try to give them some advice, community input that we have, and then let the process move forward. So again, I would simply say that if there's, you have several options.
Yeah,
Right?
I would like to make a motion.
Sure, please.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion in light of all of the new information that's been provided by Evergy and the comments from the crowd that they haven't had a chance to look at the information. I would recommend that we send this back to the Planning Commission so that this new information can be reviewed and discussed in that committee.
I'll second that.
Before we take the vote, let's be clear on a yes or no answer. A yes sends it back to the planning commission, and no doesn't.
So all your only thing you have right now is a motion to remand it back to the planning commission for further study based on the new information that you have. So if the motion passes, it goes back. If the motion fails, it doesn't go back. It doesn't mean you made any decision related to the actual application.
And if you want to just make sure that the council is clear on exactly what you're asking the planning commission to consider, just so that you have all the part. I think you stated that the new information from tonight, the new information from Evergy, but if anybody wants to add any specifics, you can do that to help guide the planning commission.
And what new information was from Evergy, just so I'm clear.
It is the location of the inbound and outbound lines is the primary, and the comparative information from other cities for consideration.
Could I also add that Evergy possibly find a different location?
Well, and so
I would,
We talked about a few.
yeah,
different options.
I would say this, and so we have a case, right? They've made application. They certainly could I would say they could withdraw that application and look at other sites. It would be a new application. This application could be tabled to give them that opportunity to consider. I don't know that we could direct them simply to make, it'll be a new application, because if they went to a new site, this process does start all over. So I hear what you're saying, and that may be something based on comments they want to consider and decide whether or not they want to continue to pursue this site or withdraw this application and submit a new site.
So if we want them to look at a different site, that our vote should be no to his.
Correct.
Correct?
I'm not
It's a
saying they
different
couldn't do it. I think if I understand, new information was mostly what was provided by Evergy to us in this packet.
Correct.
Was not provided at the time of the public hearing.
Correct.
Some of it, but for the most part, there was additional information provided at the time since the public hearing. They tried to address those issues, right? So I think it's all of those issues that were addressed in this application to go back to the planning commission. In addition to, I think the mayor provided some factual information that's important about impacts on real estate, right? I don't have, I mean, I get that, but I mean, that's not something we've had available to us. And again, no, just saying we think it will impact it or we know it's going to impact it isn't really sufficient for decision. I mean, we need to have some base. I mean, we have studies, right? I mean, I think there was a comment earlier, and again, this is not new, about the public health impacts, and yet there's no definitive reports pro or con, right? So I don't know that you could give, I can't say won't give anyway, but how credible is the information if we can't answer the question? But questions about what's the impact on property values that can be quantified to some point is valuable and is something that could be reconsidered.
Can I get a clarification? You're talking about if what application withdrawn and another location was chosen,
Yeah.
we'd start the process over again. It doesn't have to be as belabored as in the past, because a lot of the work has been done as far as what the station is, what it consists of, and all that type of thing. So there's not a lot, I mean, it's not as long as what it was in the past, correct?
Yeah, so the biggest issue is, so for any case, right, is because our rules say it has to go to the planning commission first, right? So not in every city is this the same way. But ours says it goes first to the planning commission, and it is to be treated like a zoning case, not a zoning case, but like, which means we have to have the application, we have to give published notice, we have to have basically 21 days between the date of publication and the date of the hearing, right? And so we have to back up. So timing wise, it's still going to be, and we have times that we do that. So our next application period's April 4th, right? So they would have to have, for example, for that, they'd have to have the property, the legal description, the owner's authorities, whatever that might be, to make the submission. And that case would get heard in May and then would come to the city council probably in June. I'd have to look at the calendar. So it's about a 60-day new process. Now, you're right. The information they have relative to the site and to a point are the same, but we require them to provide us, grading, what are the grades out there? Because, I mean, right, how are they going to access those things? So I would say they would have to probably spend time, 30 days or so on a new site, laying the pieces in there from an engineering standpoint. So it's probably, I mean, I don't know, fast tracked, it's probably a 90-day minimum process. But I think to answer your question, Mr. Scott, is I think relative to the motion and the second that we have that you may want to vote, I don't know voting for or against it impacts whether the next motion talks about the property being, you could send it back to the planning commission and they could choose to withdraw their application. You could send it back to the planning commission and they could choose to stay with their application.
Just to
Then it's going to
clarify
come back
on
to
here,
you. So yeah.
the voting options, and I think this might answer your question a little bit too. So there are 3 voting options that they gave us. If the governing body supports the recommendation of the planning commission and does not certify compliance with the specific rules governing this special use permit, a simple majority vote approving any conditions is required.
And understand, simple majority in this case is the governing body, so it takes 4.
Okay.
Right, so.
If the governing body chooses to remand the item back to planning commission, a simple majority vote to that effect, along with a statement specifying the basis for the governing body's failure to approve or disapprove the recommendation is required. And the third option is the governing body chooses to take an action other than the planning commission's recommendation. It certifies compliance with the specific rules governing this special use. Then a 2/3 majority vote of the governing body is required. So if we send it back to planning commission, that's not necessarily going to ask them to look at a different location. To do that, to really force that would be to accept the planning commission's denial. That would be the motion. So then you'd have to.
But he's already made the motion to.
Right, so what we're voting on now is whether we want to send it back to planning commission and talk further about this plan.
Right.
If we want to accept the planning commission's denial, then that's a different motion.
Right.
That we'd have to make.
And then from a calendar perspective, if I got this right, so if this did go back to the planning commission and they stayed with the application, it would be able to come back to the city council at its second meeting in April, because there would be no wait.
Yeah, there's no additional public hearing notification.
Right.
So we would place this probably on the April 20th planning commission, and then it could come back as early as that meeting following. So timeframes, legal timeframes about public hearings on that have been met. And so it doesn't mean they don't have to send it back right away even. I mean, if they feel they need more time, but we
But
would
to answer
likely
his
place.
question,
Yeah.
if we are really looking for a new location,
Right.
it would be a no vote on this one to make a new motion. Is
I
that,
think that would
does
be
that
a
answer
fair
your
assessment.
question?
Don't you
What-
think, or-
Take the vote on remand. If that fails, then you take
Yeah.
A new motion,
on
right?
your
Right,
Okay.
right, yes.
And also for the folks present, if it were to go back to the planning commission, that also would not be a public hearing. That would just be an extension essentially of this discussion.
They can take public input.
Correct.
I won't say it can't do a public, I mean, they can take all the public,
Not a
that
mandatory.
planning board has authority, but it's not necessarily a public hearing in the sense of the 21 days. They can take input, comment, input, however the chair would choose to do that, yes.
I think a couple of comments before I want to call the question, but we need power on the north end, pure and simple. And for any residential, any commercial, any type of development on the north end of the city, we need more power. And so that's a very critical issue, is that needs to be done. And obviously there's a timeline on that that's been set in motion by BPU. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, I think there's been a lot of misconception about what this serves. This was not designed to serve a particular city. It's designed to serve a particular area. And Edwardsville dominates that area that will be served. And if we had a 10-story hotel sitting up there right now, there would be a lot of different sentiment. And I understand it. I get it. It's unfortunate that whole thing fell apart. And we were hoping we were looking at fast food restaurants and all kinds of things up there. Unfortunately, it fell through, which kind of changes the whole visuals on the whole thing, whole project and so forth. What Evergy considers the biggest asset, that yellow line, I consider that the biggest liability in the project. So I do call the question.
So the motion's been made and second to send this back to the planning commission for additional review on the new information that was included in the agenda packet tonight, specifically mentioning the location of the inbound and the outbound lines, as well as the impact on real estate values in the surrounding areas. If I captured
And
that
my
correctly.
information was not included in the packet, but I could get that to you. if you'd
Correct,
like.
yes.
Yeah, we'll gather that.
Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
No.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
No.
Scott,
No.
Adams,
Yes.
And Mayor Cahar,
No.
So you had was that a 4-2?
4-2.
So basically the motion fails on a 4-2 vote, so there's actual vote. You still have before you this S2P application where we didn't vote on that. So you again, have the option to deny it or accept the denial. To accept it, you could, I guess, table action if you chose to. That's always an option. Right? Okay.
Well, can we make the motion that they come back with other sites? In this, no,
I don't know how I mean,
no?
You could advise it, I think, but I don't think it could be a motion because
I mean, if you're not going to approve, if, and I'm not, so if our point is that this site is not acceptable and we want them to go to a different site, then I would probably say there's not a reason to support this site and just say that, which will, whether good or bad, I mean, unless they have some comment, but at this point, I'm not hearing that. So if you recommend denial, then this site will not be, and I don't think can be reconsidered for some period of time. I don't know, you may recall, Mr. Bishop, but I think there's a period of time, it may be 12 months before a particular application on the same site can be submitted, but I'd have to verify that, so. I mean, I think what I'm hearing, and maybe they're hearing, is that this site is an inappropriate site, that another site to be determined might be more preferred somewhere in their service territory. That could be in Edwardsville.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that we deny the special use permit for Evergy at this site.
A second.
Based on the planning commission's recommendations.
we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
No.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
No.
and Mayor Cahar.
Yes.
So that motion, I believe, passes by a 4-2 vote.
Yes, sir.
The recommendation of the planning commission is upheld. And that item is complete for tonight.
Okay, moving on to the city manager report.
Oh, now I don't know. I don't know. The only thing I would note is I will be out of office. And I don't believe we have a council meeting for then November 6th, 7th. On
Did you
first-
say November?
Oh, November. I'm already thinking about my birthday. Yeah, I mean, April 6th and 7th, I will be out of the office on basically personal business. But I may be out of the office on November 6th and 7th too. I'm actually, maybe the week before that, I may be in Guatemala finally to go back. But
Thanks for the
I
warning.
think I get back on the 7th. So
Very good.
I'll be older then though.
Zach, did you have anything for us tonight?
Other than what's included in the agenda, the departmental report, I just do want to point out, don't leave, I do have the 2022 budget narrative document ready to pass out. After I do that, it'll get posted online. Typically, we like to have this done in late January, early February at the latest. Matter of timing that it didn't get put together and printed in that amount of time. So we do have those ready. We'll distribute that to the council and to staff and get that posted publicly. That's all I have.
I would, there was one, we did just get, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, so preliminary audit, so that'll be coming in. I think they got it done a little early, so.
Good.
We look at it for just to make sure they didn't miss something, but overall, it's your audit, so I'll always say that. But they always send a draft first, and then they'll make whatever final corrections they feel are appropriate, and then they will present that to the council. So it sounds like if we can get that done, they potentially April 11th meeting, which is good. That'd be earlier than normal.
Very good. Ms. Dion, did you have anything for us? Chief Mathies?
Nothing.
Chief Whittem? Dusty?
I'm a dad. The guys are working on sewer manholes. I didn't get it. But they are working on still uncovering sewer manholes. That's where they got. Do a little patching tomorrow. I got this in the winter. hopefully get through this work session tomorrow. We'll be doing some grading and seeding around it on the issues that you know is still outstanding. And appreciate all the public's patience on that. How big is the in-ground pool? That one will be fixed.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Councilman Adams, did you have anything for us?
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Councilman Bishop,
Congratulations, Dusty. That's all I got.
Councilman Malat,
Congratulations. Is it possible to ask a progress report on the silent crossing?
There is that possibility. I drove up there today. I didn't see anything going on, but there is a pile of rock, and I don't know if they put any of that storm drain pipe in, if you know.
No.
It looked like there was a big hole, but it just seemed to me like it was kind of funny that they had that closed for a whole week and they didn't do anything. Can you contact
We
them
feel your
to
frustrations,
open
and
it
yes,
Until they decide they're going to commit to some work.
yes. We will have
Some of that's
discussion.
a little tough again because that is set up by a traffic control contractor. Right? I mean, there's pieces that have to go back and forth. But
Yes.
It's not good the way it is right now. I think Ingress, Egress for the bank and the post office. Nobody knows where to go.
I think if people don't, generally speaking, if people don't see activity, they tend then to go, I could just go ahead and drive through that area. And then if they do have a big hole up there and somebody drives off in it, then you have to do it. So I drove up there today, exactly the same thing. And we will be having a call tomorrow to our contacts, get an update.
I'd like to make a comment on the substation. I am absolutely, don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely in favor of a substation. I'm not particularly excited about that spot. And I know that it does affect landowners. I think that Evergy needs to work with us a little bit better on going along I-70. You drive to Colorado, there's light poles everywhere, there's windmills everywhere. What the hell? You know, why can't we have some poles up there to serve our community? Our community's number one, but realize, like Mr. Adams said, it's not just Edwardsville, it's that whole area up there that's being served by EPU now that's not gonna be. So we can't jeopardize losing that for some kind of decisions that, you know, some people don't get along. I just wanted to make that statement on that. So, thank you.
Councilman Shriver.
I'd like to echo what a few of the council members have said, and thank the citizens for coming, and emails, conversations that I've had with several people. Everybody drives places, whether it's a different city, a different area, and I've seen homes by a substation, but I sometimes think more than ever that was a person that chose to live there. This wasn't the choice of our citizens that have lived here for 30 or 40 years. So there's got to be different areas. There's got to be other locations. And that's just the bottom line. It doesn't make sense right there too. And there's got to be places where the least disruption will happen. Dusty, congratulations. And thank you again for the workshop on Saturday. I think that was just, it was a little bit of a long day, but a very, very,
I agree.
very
I think staff
productive
would
day, right.
concur. Yeah. I would just, to your note, and because I think it's important just from a process, right? So when we get application, you know, we try to relate things to applicants about what the challenges may be. They may or may not listen to what we tell them. And at the end of the day, good or bad, right? An applicant has a right to make an application, and we have an obligation from a staff to process those obligations. And our job is to try to be as neutral as we can with facts for both bodies, right? That's kind of our role. There are times when we have applications that we might totally agree with exactly what's being set up here. But from our standpoint, we have to be obligated to trying to stay as neutral as possible. And we do make recommendations at the planning commission level, because what we have at the planning commission level for the public hearing is the information that we have. Information gets added at the planning commission level, which may change that recommendation, right? So if we look down the list and says, you know, X, Y, or Z, and all we have is what we have before us. And so we may make a recommendation for planning commission of approval, but there may be information provided at that public hearing, which is the purpose of the public hearing, that may have altered our decision. But by that point, we have to make some recommendation. I mean, if we get them, and we've done it before, you know, it's just so clear. You know, you want to put an industrial, you want to rezone a property that's zoned R2 to I1, and the comprehensive plan says it's residential. Those are pretty clear, right? Special use permits can be a little more challenging. So
Right.
So you all understand where we try to come from in these things. And I appreciate y'all taking the time tonight to, quite honestly, hear all that information.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Scott?
Well, Mike, I appreciate you saying that. And I know that was a lot of work that staff did in investigating everything and putting that information together. I really appreciate the planning commission's work, listening to the public, and just really trying to make the best decision for our city and our citizens. And I really appreciate the citizens coming in tonight and letting us know how you feel, and the emails that that most of us got. I know that I've got several, and I appreciate that. That feedback is very, very good. And I think we all agree that we need a substation. I mean, maybe not in our city or in our county, but we need the power. I mean, we all need the power. That's not an argument. But I hope that Evergy comes back with a new plan, a new location where it does not impact, you know, it's not in the backyard of people that have been here forever. A lot of that land was in trust. So it's been, you know, decades and decades. And so there's right of ways all over the area, all over near 435 and I-70, that they can run those distribution lines. And we know we need the power. I mean, that's where the future is going. And we know we need it up north. And I hope that they come back with a good plan with very little to no impact on our citizens and their property. And I think we can all live with an ugly telephone pole or a distribution pole that's 80 foot in the air, as long as it's in the air and along the right of way. We're going to drive by it. We don't have to live by it. We don't have to sit in our backyards, you know, and look at a substation that does create a little bit of noise and does have electromagnetic fields, you know, that generates it. It's proven data. It's still not proven scientifically, you know, if it has health effects, but there's no data for it or against it. So it concerns me. So I appreciate everybody's work. Appreciate the work up here at the council, and congratulations again. That's the best part right there.
Absolutely. Best news of the week.
So I'll try to make it quick. I know I've said plenty tonight. The quiet zone, that's something I was going to ask about. When we drive by, it seems like there's nothing going on, but the roads are closed, and that's one of our main thoroughfares. So if we could just pass that communication along, hey, this is a main road for us. Let's get some things moving.
Work it or
That
get
would
out.
be great. Council workshop, I believe that Mr. Webb will be bringing an update to the community and the things that came from the council workshop, the items that were discussed. Overall, I think it was a really successful day, and just hearing from our department heads and having some roundtable discussion. So thank you for everyone participating in that, and we'll hear more about that later. A Stan Tech came out today. Thank you. Please pass the word along. Thank you. I'm pretty excited about the award that park got, and what's to come of that. As far as Evergy goes, they took off pretty quick, so I couldn't thank them for coming and answering questions. I know that's a lot of work that they put into this, and I'm sure that's you know, a lot to go through. And so I do appreciate them being here to answer questions. I know it's probably not an easy process, but just to reiterate some of the things that the council said is it's not that we won't need it in the future, but let's look for a spot that doesn't affect neighborhoods and residents and property right in the middle of Edwardsville. On behalf of Edwardsville, Dusty, congratulations. And lastly, if you got an email from me today, it was not from me, so please delete it. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thanks very much.